I think when I did my first exhibition in Melbourne, I almost like, in my mind, I always wanted to in Bangalore. And when my mother nudged me, a few friends nudged me, all it took me to get thinking about it seriously.
How good were you in drawing when you were in school?
Well, I thought it was good, but my teacher thought I was tracing. So in fact, I got a feedback once, stop tracing, and even if you're drawing, but that's, perhaps I did have something. Essentially, my subject, I
Right.
try to paint a city or a
Right.
place on a single canvas, right? And so I was in San Francisco those days, and I think that environment just helped trying to put the whole city into a single painting.
Yeah.
The thing with this one is that it's not something that happens overnight, for
Yeah.
sure. This one is a bit more organic. So I call it like my home, which is Australia, then my origins, India, and then experiences the rest of the world. So I always paint in these three buckets.
Yeah.
In the beginning of my artistic journey, it was mostly the experiences because these were travel souvenirs. Then after settling in Melbourne, it became a lot more of painting home in Melbourne, and then with this exhibition, now I've got this chance to do a lot of India.
Right. I mean, when you see paintings of this kind, and most of you, if you visit Chitrakala Parishath, and see his work, you'll want him to paint your city. Hello and namaskar. Welcome to this podcast called The Thing with This One Is. This is a podcast for people who want specifics, details, nuances. Let's understand what goes on in the mind of a creator, an innovator, an artist. What drives such people? What is their motivation? And along the way, let's also get to know them very well. Today, we have with us Santosh Mahale. Santosh is an artist. He does a lot of paintings with cities and birds, and he's bringing his exhibition to Bengaluru very soon. We'll talk about all that, but it's also important to talk to him about his previous career of that as a management consultant. How did he switch from that into pure art? So, welcome to the podcast, Santosh.
Thanks, Ram. I'm super excited to be here, to be with you for this so long and in this form. So thanks, and I'm looking forward to sharing my story.
Santosh and I are batchmates from college, 1998 batch, BITS Pilani, and we are reconnecting after 25 years almost. Yeah. So it's pretty awesome, very fascinating to see you. So what have you been doing since engineering?
Well, lots, and a couple of things you already mentioned about what I've been doing, but just to sort of break it down, perhaps leaving Pilani as a mechanical engineer, I took a sort of an unconventional path in those days in bucking the IT trend. And
yeah, you went to work for Tata Motors, if I remember correct, right? That
yes,
wasn't
and
the
I
usual
did
thing.
I did not have any senior or anyone to accompany me. The only guy in a sea of IITians and others in that, but I loved it. It was a privilege and honor to work with the Tatas. 2 years there, but then I knew always that I wanted to go to the US, study a bit more, and then I took a decision to join industrial engineering. That was almost a path away from engineering.
Right.
Following that, a job at Unilever started to get me focused on supply chains. And then I was, knowing my personality, liking to do different things and trying out things, I thought consulting would be a natural fit. So I started off as a more specialist supply chain consultant, but eventually went into management consultant.
Did you do an MBA?
Well, not before. So there was, this is now, I was in the States at that point, following Purdue. So I lived in the States for about 10 years.
Wow.
Midway through that, met and married my Kiwi Indian wife, who was always wanted to come back towards the ANZ region to raise our kids. And so in parallel, I was having this MBA itch, right? So to your point, there was this, just for the sake of checking it more so. And because we knew we were going to leave the States, I chose to do one in Europe. I did a 1-year rapid MBA, a short stint in Dubai for 3 years, and then in Melbourne.
Oh, that's some life you had, man.
Yes, 6 years in Melbourne. That's like a record. Never stayed in a single continent for more than 6 years.
But I think you've lived in some of the best cities in the world, I would say, And but at heart, you're a Bangalorean, right? Because you grew up here.
Definitely,
And,
yes.
Right? That's one of the big things.
Correct. So I was all of my childhood born in Mumbai, but for all purposes, a Bangalore boy, raised here, late 80s, 90s.
Must be very different then as compared to now.
Yeah, completely. And I'm sure a lot of it is known, and people talk about how things have changed. But it's for me, what stands out was Bengaluru in those days was very spontaneous and accessible. Right,
Hmm.
we would be crisscrossing the city a couple of times in just one day. We would be running down the stairs of Vidhan Sauda. We would be, and even nature was all around. I
Yeah.
mean, it was known as the Garden City. Was very immersive in terms of being involved in nature, being this sort of the sleepy
Yeah.
town name that Bangalore had. I think we enjoyed that, right? And of
Nice.
course a lot has changed, and a
Mm.
lot for the better, and it's definitely progressed and become one of the top cities on the global map.
Yeah.
But then what it means for someone like me who
Mm.
left that Bangalore,
Mm.
it just becomes harder for me to sort of connect. And then I'm like, how do I relive those
Mm.
times?
Yeah.
And somehow that's when we talk about my art, you'll see
Yeah.
how I'm bringing that back
So
as
it's
a
quite
subject.
fitting that you're bringing, yeah, the solo exhibition outside of Australia is happening in Bengaluru for you then.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So I think when I did my first exhibition in Melbourne, I almost like, you know, in my mind, I always wanted to do in Bangalore. And when my mother nudged me, a few friends nudged me, all it took me to get thinking about it seriously.
Mm. And Chitrakala Parishath is where have his exhibition November, end of November. We'll of course talk about that, but it's very exciting for me. It's very fascinating. Because from what you were doing and what you were having, you, was it in Melbourne that you finally took the plunge, or was the painting kida always there in your life?
Well, the tipping point was Melbourne, so there's a lot of
Mm.
credit to that in terms of allowing me to make that decision. But I think to do justice, we need to go back a few decades. So I was always, I mean, I wouldn't say I was like a super creative kid. I was inclined enough that my mom thought about this a couple of times and shut it off. But I
How
would.
good were you in drawing when you were in school?
Well, I thought it was good, but my teacher thought I was tracing. So in fact, I got a feedback once: stop tracing, and even if you're drawing, but that's perhaps I did have something,
Okay.
and that was actually a drawing of a bird. Thinking about it, but see, I mean, what I always had, I think, that creative
Mm.
outlet, and it came through cooking, as
Mm.
an adult,
Okay.
and so there was always that desire to express myself creatively in one form or the
Mm.
other. I think the point where it changed was in 2008 when I'd gone to London, and I thought, I was like considering buying a souvenir, perhaps a magnet, a teacup or something. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm actually going to come back and paint
Mm.
London my way, right?
Okay.
And actually, if you see, that was 2008, and until now,
Mm.
that's essentially my subject. I
Right.
try to paint a city or a
Right.
place on a single canvas, right?
Mm.
And so I was in San Francisco those days, and I think that environment just helped me. It just
Mm.
meant I painted a lot more, even though I was not painting San Francisco only, but
Right.
that whole environment got me to do more. Then, like many things, you have a kid, and I was doing oil paints, so I had
Mm.
to pause it, and
Right.
as I was doing all this jumps geographically as well
Mm.
until COVID happened,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And now this is where, for someone like me with a young family,
Mm.
doing management consulting, time was the essence of everything. And
Traveling a lot, I
of
suppose,
course, yeah,
because of the
every week,
consulting job.
yeah, every
Yeah.
week.
How many flights every week or every month typically?
Well, enough to be a bit like up in the air kind of
Oh,
a
yeah.
scenario, but it's I think more importantly, I'll talk about that as well. I think all of it had a part to play,
Mm.
right? Traveling to all these places
Right.
and absorbing it as part of my work. So it
Yep.
was not like I had to, go out of my way to.
Mm.
It meant I could only absorb more cities, and now it's almost become subconscious that because I've lived and experienced so many places,
Mm.
I go to a place and I start looking for those patterns. I started
Mm.
looking at, what's similar here, what differentiates this city, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, certainly I think all of that started playing a role in that,
So COVID kind of gave you that luxury of time because the travel time that you were spending in the air, in hotels and airports and
correct.
lounges and such, now you were at home.
Correct.
Now, did that give a push towards pursuing art like more seriously than what you were doing earlier?
Yeah, no, definitely. See, and for my paintings, it's about a city, and I'm trying to put
Mm.
the whole city into a single painting.
Yeah.
Now, in my days in Dubai and the US, I was always renting, and that
Mm.
meant I was constrained. And I'm a very practical, rational person, so I
Right.
wouldn't paint too big because I had to then
Mm.
carry all of that
Yeah.
artwork.
Right.
So
But you must
what
get relocation by the company, right?
Well, I did, but I still would not, I would not go bigger and bolder, right?
Okay.
And suddenly in Melbourne, we settled, we got a house, and those
Mm.
walls were crying for art. Here,
Ooh.
COVID gave me time.
Mm.
And so I really think it allowed me to go bigger and bolder, which sort of changed, this whole outlook towards art, right? To take it a bit
Mm.
more professionally than doing little souvenirs for myself.
Mm. Right. And then coming to India and then going into nostalgia and looking at Bengaluru or other cities of India also probably played a role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so now it's become almost like this pattern in my,
Mm.
so there's more places I want to paint than I can. And
Mm.
I think doing these exhibitions, it's almost like having an exam deadline, right? So I know I
Mm.
want to express in, these special places in India. I want to
Yeah.
bring them out on canvas.
Right.
I think having an exhibition like this has given me the chance. I've got a
Mm.
certain deadline, and I've been pushing myself the last 6 7 months to
Oh,
complete them.
let's dive a little deeper into this. Let's understand your thought process, your decision making. Because what you were doing in Melbourne, of all places, you were with AD Kearney, you know, the kind of job you were having, possibly the amount of money you're making, that in itself is an end for a lot of people. People work hard towards achieving that and then living that life. And then here you are taking a break and saying, you know what, let me give a shot at painting
Yeah.
or art, basically.
Yeah.
How did that come up? What's the thing with this one is?
Yeah, the thing is with this one is that it's not something that happens overnight for
Yeah.
sure. This one is a bit more organic. I would say that, I'd never, if you asked me even 5 years back, I
Hmm.
was probably not going to tell you that, this is probably the path I was taking.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, I kind of knew that, I wanted to sort of get out from the corporate cycle and do something on my own.
Hmm.
I've moonlighted a few things, and because I'm such an extremely practical, rational person, I would
Right.
be, sort of killing those ideas before
Hmm.
they would go too far, knowing the constraints or impracticalities.
Hmm.
After all, as a consultant, this is what I'm doing for big corporates, trying to help them assess their risks from all sides. So,
Hmm.
but what I'm trying to say is, it's an organic evolution. I think, first of all, I needed the tipping point to happen, and that
Hmm.
tipping point happened only because I was willing to invest, take a few risks, do that first solo show, go part time with my work. So it's sort of unheard of,
Hmm.
that I started working as 4 days as a
Hmm.
management consultant.
Okay.
So for a male in his 40s to do that, and again, very thankful for the
Hmm.
environment in Australia that allowed me to do it.
Right.
But again, taking those decisions allowed me to take those steps where I could see that, or the tipping point sort of happen. And when I say the tipping point for me, it was like, I felt, okay, here I am,
Hmm.
I'm doing something I enjoy. I can see a path here that,
Hmm.
that could be sustainable.
Hmm.
Again, I'm just early days. I'm nowhere
Of
saying this
course.
is, it's a privilege to be an artist. But I think, once that tipping point happened, it's almost like, those some of those next steps became natural.
Right.
And that's why it may seem like, I'm giving up this
Yeah.
dream job to do this, but I felt like, it's happened over time. There's
Hmm.
always a desire.
But that's already success for me because in when we look at it this way, and especially like we said earlier, we're reconnecting after so many years, and when people discuss this kind of things, it's like, अरे पता है महाले क्या कर रहा है नौकरी छोड़ दिया उसने पेंटिंग कर रहा है आजकल what the hell what's wrong with him how is he doing this and then you get to like wow he's doing this is brilliant that's why I wanted to really get to know and especially at our age basically when you are in your 40s responsibilities are there
Yeah.
you're probably doing a certain kind of job which demands a lot from you in terms of time plus then there are family you probably have kids there's
Yeah.
a whole demand on you for so many different things then you have these excuses yeah I have this hobby but time ही नहीं मिलता I just can't find time for this there's no way I can spend time and then in spite of and you had very similar thing probably
Yeah, of
busier
course.
than
Yeah.
most others management consulting
Yeah.
is a very demanding sort of a career
Yeah.
but you still were able to do all this so how did that come about?
Yeah, I think, like a lot of factors. I think there's a bit of self discipline that perhaps came from my swimming days. I know a lot of people associate me with swimming, but I
Yeah.
think credit to that. There's obviously some self discipline required. I think there needs to be a bit of practicality and openness to this. So I didn't approach it like, with a bit of stubbornness saying,
Hmm.
what? to hell with this job, I'm going to do art. I think I took it more like, I think, how do I crack this, right? There's an urge to do something, and I, lucky for me, COVID gave me the time to test that urge. When I could see the results, sort of the next step came, right, which is, where do I want to take this, right? Do I want to do more of this? And I think then I took a few steps to do more of it. And then you start thinking, okay, is this what Santosh is going to be like, a part-time artist trying to do a show here and there in Melbourne? And I'm like, no, I want to go bigger and bold. I want to do an international show. I want to come back to my Bengaluru and do a show here. So that's when, again, these are sort of natural steps that help me make. And I said, okay, you know what, if I want to do something like this, I just can't be a part-time artist. So let me do the next logical thing. Let me pause my work for a year and see where it would take me. And so I'm sort of in that midway through that journey.
Right.
But to your point, it's, I think, that open mindset and having that flexibility to pivot
Yeah. And
is
money
key.
also plays a role in, because at this age you are also want to be sure that you have a paycheck coming,
Correct.
or
Yeah.
you have a certain amount of money in your bank account,
Yeah.
or in some of our batchmates' cases, capital gains.
Of course.
Then they go buy expensive cars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Was that not a factor for you?
Well, I mean, I think it's money is a very personal thing.
Excuse
I
me.
think it's an individual and a
Yeah.
family decision. I wouldn't say it's in personal. So in my case, it was a collective decision with my wife and where we wanted to be. See, some of it, Ram, is planned right now. Like I said, while I didn't know I wanted to be an artist 5 years back, I knew I was going to not be continuing to be in this sort of corporate cycle. Now, one other thing with management consulting is it's very natural. Might be people don't go to become an artist, but there are people doing. They're not career management consultants. They would go to do to the industry or do a startup. So it's very natural for us to manage our exits, right? And for me, in the last 3 years, it was almost like I wanted to do something with my creative energies and do something on that direction. So I think it's just a matter of planning that. Of course, some financial decisions had to be made, like I ensured I had some investments, and sort of obviously was careful with my finances to plan for that buffer, because like every startup founder, or even an artist would know that it's the first 3 years that are a bit more struggle, and you want to have some buffer. So all those, of course, are considerations, highly individual decision, and when you take it as well, right? It's not like you could have I could have been a part-time artist for another 5 years,
Yeah.
but I just felt like this was a good time to accelerate. I had some support, and I said, okay, you know what? Let me pause and
Nice.
then see what happens.
Good that you mentioned that, because that means you cannot pull the "I'm a poor artist" card when you go out for drinks after this.
Oh, well, yeah,
Okay.
it's just 6 months now in, so
Sure.
maybe I'll say that after another year.
Yeah. But another thing is, this is not an individual call,
Yeah,
because you have a wife, you have a kid.
correct.
How did your wife literally allow you to do this?
Yeah, it's my favorite question to answer, because no, it's not easy, and it's full credit. She's fully supportive. Obviously, she's seen me for 14 years. We've not just married like a couple of years back. So she's seen the organic evolution of my the art side. But the funny thing is, she did have one condition, right? She said, like, you're not quitting your job or even thinking of it till your art goes beyond family and friends. So it's a well-known joke, or a thing, that your art's bought by your family, friends, and usually it's in that circle. Fortunately for me, I had a few collectors who purchased my art. They resonated with this, and people I didn't know at that point. And so I was lucky, at least I got a chance to take the next step.
That's really cool, man. So your wife ensured that you're serious about your
Of
art before
course.
you. So it's not just like, okay, let me try this, but it's like, okay,
No,
yeah, you're good at this.
there was a bit of a business planning. There was a bit of, like, let's see if this is being, this is going beyond the
Right?
family friend circle. So there was a lot of that.
Ooh, a Spanish MBA came to some use then.
Of course.
So now let's switch tracks a little bit, because I understand that you have this entire background, the rational thought process. Always people say that art comes from the heart and everything. I remember this uh, many years ago when we were in college, and during OSS, there was this band who had come over. I'm not gonna name them, but anyway, I was in the press club, Hindi press club at that time. I was
Okay.
interviewing them,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked him the question, "How do you make these songs?" Because at that time,
Mm.
wanted to understand that, and he said, "My music comes from my heart." I
Okay.
had no idea what that meant. It probably requires a little bit of maturity, to understand the creation process and what
Yeah.
goes into making a work of art. Which, like you said, and your wife ensured that happened, is somebody else also says the same thing,
Correct. Yes. Of
and many
course.
more people for that matter eventually do so, which is phenomenal. And I think every artist eventually develops their unique style.
Correct.
And whatever little paintings that I have seen, or art that I have seen, and our generation probably learned art or appreciation of art from Dil Chahta Hai. When
Yes.
we saw this guy painting, and then the Dimple Kapadia's character comes and critically analyzes it and said, "Oh, baksa band hai,
Yeah.
aankheं band hai," and then this and that. That's when we probably learned how to
Yeah.
appreciate art. But I've seen a certain unique style that
Yeah.
you have in your work. Can you talk a little more about that? How did you develop that, and how did that come about?
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for that reflection. I'll talk about my art, but just to comment on what you said, I think that's finding your signature style is a very key aspect for any artist. I think, like your previous questions around about quitting or or even pausing and
Hmm.
I think the first thing is an artist needs to be comfortable in their
Yeah.
own voice or
Hmm.
their own expression, and I think finding that subject or artistic style is key to that
Yeah.
because you don't want to come out and keep dabbling in your
Hmm.
style or
Hmm.
something and already have these other pressures like financial or other things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So thanks for reflecting on that. But coming to your question on the art, so I have two distinct styles
Hmm.
deliberately, and that's because I paint cities and I want to show big and small cities
Yeah.
or certain regions in a certain way.
Hmm.
So my signature style for bigger cities is my map series,
Hmm.
where you'll see like how I've painted Bangalore or Mumbai or Kolkata or even smaller suburbs
Hmm.
in Melbourne and Bangalore with this distinct, there's the map perspective that overlays the geographical elements like
Hmm.
the rivers or lakes or whatever parks, and then you have the street network coming on top and the icons sort of bringing all of it together,
Yeah.
right? So these are like very complex, as complex as cities can be, and I'm trying
Hmm.
to solve that problem of bringing all of it onto one
Hmm.
canvas, right?
Hmm.
The other series I call the Windows to the World.
Okay.
And here I call it windows because I deliberately paint like a
Wood.
border, a darker border around that smaller canvas to make it look like looking into the window
Hmm.
or out of the window, and this usually is more landscape dominated.
Hmm.
I keep it for smaller cities. So,
Right.
like in Bangalore, I would paint the Nandi Hills or
Hmm.
Banargata,
Yeah.
or I've painted even our Pilani, right?
Oh, wow.
And it's just that, when let's take for Pilani, I wouldn't want to paint the road network or the orientation of
Yeah.
Pilani in that northwestern or northeastern Rajasthan, right? So
Hmm.
it's more about, it was campus and other things there, right? So I picked the style based on the place and
Hmm.
how much I want to or how what sort of details I want to go into.
Hmm. So, I'm sure you must have included the clock tower then.
Of course, it's and the mess plate. But I
Yeah.
won't say much. I'll let
Yeah.
people come and check out. And
Now, coming to the painting style or whatever, is there a routine, or is there a template that you have developed for yourself which helps you create newer art as you
yeah,
go along?
yeah, certainly, I would not shy away from using the word template.
Ah, okay.
See, and like many things, and you perhaps may have caught it. I'm proud of my legacy as an engineer, as a management consultant.
Hmm.
I pride in my analytical thinking,
Hmm.
and I enjoy art. So
Hmm.
I found this way to express both sides, right? So I've as much, loved the discovering these hidden gems in the cities and getting a bit like,
Hmm.
almost nerdy to a point, like, why and being curious and
Hmm.
as much as I love colors and playing with like what would look nice and bringing a composition together, right?
Hmm.
So to your point, I try to blend
Hmm.
both of those things, and
Hmm.
composition is everything for me because I'm trying to solve a problem,
Hmm.
right? And going back to the consulting world example, I would say, like, we would boil the ocean with all our research analysis to present that one slide to the exec,
Right.
right? They don't want to see 50 slides.
Yeah.
So it's the same way I'm looking at, if I'm painting Kolkata, I mean, I'm, from my travel, starting from my travel to what I've learned or a little bit what I've been curious about, I'm doing and digging and researching and doing everything till I bring all of it and present Kolkata in
Wow.
one
Unlike the
canvas.
marketing world where people are okay with 250 slides and they'll sit
Yeah.
through
Well,
it.
it was, is, like, I think until ChatGPT came, people would say it's hard to write one page, right? It's
Right.
always easier to write the whole book, but sort of like that, right? So there's this pressure of, self-induced pressure. I was like, I've got to represent the city in one page
Mm.
or one canvas, and there's so many things I want to bring. I want to go below the surface. It's not just the
Right.
five or six iconic landmarks that I want to put.
Right.
So, so to your point, this composition, which includes colors, the layout, what gets included, what's not, how it all comes together.
Mm.
I put it all under the umbrella of the composition,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And that literally takes almost, in engineering speak, 50% of my Venn diagram, right?
Okay.
And then I would go to drawing because
Right.
my art is fairly detailed in terms of the drawing. I
Okay.
enjoy drawing. I also, as perhaps as an engineer, want to give enough to the observer
Huh.
to then catch on to it and make their own stories. So I
Okay.
don't want to make it completely abstract in a way that
Hmm.
people need to be explained what's happening in that, but in a sense that you can see enough that then you create your
Hmm.
own paths.
Hmm.
And then of course, the last part where the coloring happens, there's a bit of bringing in my artistic side,
Hmm.
and then I let go of, okay, this road had to go this way, or I
Of
can just
course.
say, this looks good and let me mix these couple of things.
Hmm.
So yeah, so summarizing that, it's templatized to a point where there's some very conscious thinking of what I want to do, how I want to express.
Hmm.
There's some detailed drawings I spend, and then I enjoy the painting process
Right.
to finish the
So
work.
when you're staring at a blank canvas,
Yeah.
you kind of already have a thing in your head that this is where I'm going with.
Correct.
Probably 50% of your way there.
Yes.
And which has started probably many years ago when you were in that city
Correct.
and you had observed a bunch of things. And a
Correct.
lot of it is memory. It's not like you've taken pictures and you're referring to those pictures. Or how is that
Absolutely.
working?
Yeah, like, so let's take the example of Nandi Hills, right?
Right.
So there's a story, funny story. I'm a Bangalore boy. Going to Nandi Hill was no brainer before
Yeah.
until I've come back and all of a
Hmm.
sudden everyone wants to be there at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Hmm.
So we happened to be in a hotel at the foothills of the hill, and very very casually woke up at 5 and came
Hmm.
out of the resort to just see that it was jam packed, and we went far enough that we couldn't even come back, right?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden we were like, sort of taking the long way back around the hill back to the hotel, right?
Hmm.
And therein I observed, so many other things which I would have never observed or seen if I had gone up the hill like many others.
Hmm.
And that was the pattern of the fields, and and there were wineries and avocado farms and all this in the backdrop of smaller hills and stones. And so to your point, it was pretty instant at that moment that mine on the hill painting is actually going to dominate more on this landscape
Hmm.
than just the hill and everything that's there on top of the
So
hill.
you saw the stuff which is not necessarily touristy,
Yes, you can
you
say
know,
that. Or by, yeah,
and what's something that you will just miss because you didn't go for that. You
yes,
went for the top of the hill, the palace is there, and the temple, etc. But there's a whole lot more to
yeah,
Nandi Hills that you observed, and then
yes.
you brought it to the painting.
And so yeah, so we had, we never regretted the fact that we had woken up at 5 o'clock, and
Yeah.
so we experienced something that was completely unplanned.
Wow.
And so so that, to your point, comes into the painting. It almost becomes a central part of the
Right.
painting,
Correct.
that this base of the hill has all this going on,
Mm.
and so much to the identity of the place.
Wow, it's brilliant. So we have a couple of your paintings here that we should talk about. And we have the Nandi Hills painting also. Again, it's like when I take a glance at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Nandi Hills. And then I want to look more.
Yes.
And then I start discovering more stuff. Talk about this. What's the thing with this one? This is the Nandi Hills
So
painting.
yeah, so it's obviously the three main hills, the seven hills in the region, but the three popular ones are depicted. That's a scene many people get as they drive along that road from Bangalore. But as you see, then it's the Nandi is there, so it's called the hill, and
Yeah.
I've tried to blend it with the landscape patterns.
So bottom left is the temple, right?
Correct. So that brings my Birdseye,
Ah,
the exhibitions are called Birdseye
Birdseye. Yeah.
series, and I often tend to take a bird's eye view, right?
Mm.
Perhaps it's, I think now drone cameras are common, but, the patterns and the shapes that one doesn't look, I find
Mm.
those interesting.
Mm.
And in art, especially because, it's in the end, I think what, when we put patterns together, they tend to look nice. They get us curious, like, what is it? Doing this, first of all, there were certain emotions that I went through
Mm. Like what, for
observing.
example?
Oh, well, like, first of all, like, thankful that there's something like as precious still there for us to enjoy.
Right.
And then, like being able to appreciate all the details.
Mm.
So I hope I can, so for my collectors or appreciators, be able to feel that. And then if I can tempt them to visit it, or, awareness can help then,
Mm.
uh, protect them, that would be a mission
Yeah,
accomplished.
and when you look at it more, when I hear you talk, there's a lot of, I think bird's eye view also comes from a lot of time spent in the aeroplanes, probably, because you're getting that, the kind of stuff that you'll see out of an aeroplane when you're approaching an airport.
Yes,
The whole
it
fields
is.
and all that, right? And what's the bird? What's the bird there?
So there's that's a paradise flycatcher.
Hmm.
And so birds and me go again a long way. It's I was having an independent path, and that's perhaps a common hobby my wife and I had.
Hmm.
We started off in the States where we would be hiking these national parks, and as a motivation to not count our steps, we would
Hmm.
choose to count the birds or
Hmm.
photograph them, and so that sort of, you stop thinking how many steps you've taken.
The big gear thing. Did you ever go?
I never did any of those again, because but I was, we were both passionate. We would go
Okay.
out of our way
Hmm.
to places just because of the like a certain bird or something we had not seen.
Oh,
So
nice.
today, what the way I bring it back is, any painting, so you see Kolkata has three birds and Nandi Hill has one. So depending on the size of the
Yeah.
canvas, I put one or two or four,
Hmm.
and they're all, birds are universal, right? So
Hmm.
no matter where you go, like you go to crowded cities like Mumbai, and you got millions of flamingos coming.
Right.
You're here in Bangalore, and with all this traffic and everything, there are some exotic birds just in some little green pockets, like the Sankey Tank or the West End Hotel, or other spots, right? So it's interesting. They are resilient.
Hmm.
They are they can predict things like the weather or
Hmm.
other things. So I always find them interesting. It's always they have so many species, so it's
Yeah.
very interesting. There's always something new.
Right.
You go to Australia and you'll see all these colorful parrots like
Hmm.
just in your backyard, right?
Right.
And and you go to some other country, and there are these other exotic birds, very accessible and very. So I felt, like I'm trying to bring the essence of a city or a place on a single
Hmm.
canvas. And I think these birds are ambassadors because, again, many of them are endemic.
Yeah.
And even if they're not endemic, they love a certain city or place. And that's why
Yeah.
they choose to breed and settle
Sure.
there.
Sure. Wow. That's fascinating. So sometimes the cities or the places themselves are like a muse, or they're a character that you're painting. And sometimes the cities are so overwhelming that there is no way you could not paint them. I
Yeah.
think the other one that we have here is Kolkata painting. I think
Yes.
Kolkata would fall into that category,
Yeah,
probably.
absolutely. So no, I think well said, Ram, because it is overwhelming, but I love that challenge,
Yeah.
just like in consulting. So Kolkata was a place I visited in 2018, and this is my first visit there, and I just loved every sense of that. Right, it's almost like being in India. You're in a foreign place, foreign
Mm.
not because everything is different. You're absorbing,
Mm.
especially for me, from being from the south, and every sense, the ambassador taxis look different, and you have
Yeah.
these trams like you're in the 80s. And
Right.
let's if I go into the food, it's another, every meal we had was awesome and something different, right? We
Yeah.
never had to repeat something, and it was completely different for my palate as well,
Mm.
right? And then you start seeing these North Calcutta homes, and the culture,
Right.
the architecture of, that's the Dakshineshwar temple.
Mm.
Again, like things I've never seen before in my own country. And
Yeah.
I know we celebrate diversity. And
Right.
so for me, it was the overwhelming part or complexity is like, how am I bringing all this into, again, that single canvas?
Mm.
But somehow I find a way to break it down.
There's fish also. I was thinking that because you were a swimming captain in college.
And
So it's, I was
well,
birds. I was wondering why there's no fish, but then I see spot some fish in. But there's something unique about the fish that you have in the Kolkata painting.
yeah. So there's a it is, and I love this part of it because
Mm.
I know in my problem solving, if I can call it, there has to be fish associated with the Bengalis. They love their
Yeah.
fish.
Right.
I loved the fish there. But then, I could paint the hilsa somewhere around. But
Mm.
then what I chose here was this is a fish pattern that goes is very popular in the saris of the
Mm.
Bengalis. And again, that color, right? That little off white and red.
Mm.
So I'm sort of doing two things in one go:
Mm.
bringing the fish because it's such a part of integral part of
Yeah.
the Bengali culture, and then bringing another aspect of their traditional cotton saris
Right.
and bringing it together.
And I also see a lot of nostalgia coming to fore through all the heritage sort of buildings that you have.
Yeah.
You sort of capture beauty that is there, has always been there for probably hundreds of years. But don't see too much of modern stuff. Do you think the cities are losing the beauty in their modern architecture or modern constructions that are happening around us?
Yes, certainly. I think I am biased towards heritage, and I truly believe, like as much as the birds need to be protected,
Hmm.
these buildings need to be protected
Right.
because this is the identity. Like, so I have made an identity of Kolkata for myself, and if I
Hmm.
go there another 10 years and I don't see the writers' building,
Hmm.
it's disorienting, right?
Yeah.
So, this style of putting these buildings in a row, Ram, is to just overemphasize that part,
Hmm.
right? So in Calcutta, there's a it's the capital for heritage buildings in India, highest
Yeah.
number of heritage buildings,
Right.
right? So certainly
And all kinds of architecture, not just British architecture, I
it
suppose.
yeah, but when a heritage defined from when it was built,
Sure.
so and it's still
The
existing. Correct.
badis and all also, like, even if you go to people's houses, their own havelis, kind of what they call
Correct.
the badis,
It
there
would be
itself have a
correct.
character to
Yeah,
themselves.
so all those North Calcutta homes are heritage homes in themselves, right? So I overemphasize by putting them in a row, Ram, because
Hmm.
then because when let's say you and I walk on the streets of Calcutta, it's not like all buildings are in a row,
Hmm.
and we with the way we construct today, or we have development cropping everywhere,
Hmm.
we tend to then lose, or the noise sort of makes us
Hmm.
distracted from the actual, right?
Sure. And then you dropped in a little bit of Robindra Ekla Cholore there.
Yes, and
And is that because art is such a lonely profession
I would say
or a
there it
pursuit rather
is
than a profession?
it is there. I would I've tried few things in life, but I would say I have super credit for artists because it is a very hardworking, and
Hmm.
you're solo most of the time trying to not prove something, but to just execute and do what you have to do. It's a
Hmm.
lot of your own time, and
Hmm.
I'm comfortable with that. I've
Sure.
been partly introvert, so it's not like for me it's hard to enjoy my own company. But
Hmm.
the thing is, it in this case, I think Rabindra Sangeet helped me. I was listening to
Hmm.
that for a large part of doing this work to immerse myself more into the
Hmm.
Bengali and Calcutta culture as I
Right.
was painting. So I
Super.
thought it deserved a spot there.
Wow. And then obviously there is Ma Durga, and that's why the red.
Yeah, so yes, so Ma Durga here, and if you see my Mumbai paintings, you'll see Ganpati, and
Yeah.
I think these icons go beyond religion, right?
Sure.
So in Kolkata, no matter you go in Dasara or not, this is going to hit you, right?
Yes.
And what I'm trying to do here is it's an icon because everything else is an icon. The Rosgollas and the Mohun Bagan football is an
Yes.
icon. But Ma Durga is almost like that icon holding the whole city, so it's
Yes.
bigger and beyond.
Right.
And in any of my cities series, you will see it's not necessarily always a religious icon or some other, but it could
Hmm.
be like in Bangalore, it's just the rangoli patterns which
Hmm.
we see done on the streets, right? So it's a pattern that holds this whole painting together, and I'm
Hmm.
not just downgrading it to one icon
Wow.
somewhere in the painting.
So, do you have a point where you say, okay, my painting's done now? Or like, is there always like, oh, I could have still done this, still done that? Is that something?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, artists. That's the thing. You need to take away the art, they say, from an artist to stop painting. When I look at it even now, I'm like, oh, you know what? I could have done that better, or I could have touched up there and here. So I think I can't help it but think that way.
Can never be satisfied.
You could never, but in my case, given, there is a conscious story and a composition that I'm trying to achieve. Unless I'm like, I look at it at the end and say those colors are off and I need to redo. But mostly, I think, again, taking a very planned approach, I think helps me to sort of, have those checkpoints and say, I'm not like at the end of it and saying, what have I done?
Yeah. And some rational people could come with, how could you miss this particular aspect of my city? Does
Of
that
course.
happen?
And that's why I think art is very personal. I think, I certainly respect that. And the way I look at it is, you know what, there'll be a bird's eye Kolkata hopefully one day, and I'll get to paint, 15
Ah,
paintings of Kolkata.
right.
And let's go deep into what you exactly wanted.
Right. Cities and birds coming together. So, what are the different cities you have painted? We are seeing Nandi Hills and Kolkata for day. What are
So
the other places that you have painted?
yeah, so in Birdseye, Bangalore, because of course, we're talking about India. So I have two galleries at Chitrakala. So one will be completely focused on Bangalore and the Bangalore nostalgia. So Nandi Hills, Bannerghatta, and a few other, zooming into the parks, and even my current suburb of Malleshwaram, where my parents live. So those become the focus of the paintings. And then I have the other gallery where it's the rest of India, and I've got paintings from my roots. So I speak Konkani, so roots in Mangalore, going down to Pilani, which I was fortunate someone commissioned, and then all these other Mumbai where I was born, and all these other cities that I've really enjoyed traveling in the last 10 years. I wanted to
Right.
bring them together for this.
And also international cities, like what are the
I just
different
got a
ones?
few.
Huh.
I brought Bali. So interestingly, Bali was one of the most traveled destinations from Australia till
Oh,
Tokyo overtook
oh wow.
that a few
Okay.
years back. And interestingly, Bali is becoming the top destination for
For
Indians
Indians,
now.
yes.
We
Yes.
even have a direct flight, I hear, from Bangalore now to
Yeah.
Bali. And so I've got my whole Bali series.
Okay.
It's also with the Hindu culture. I thought it was something interesting for someone who has not experienced
Yeah, a lot of
Bali.
people get surprised by that because they haven't just read history, I
Yes,
suppose. But good
exactly.
that you
It
remind
is.
people that there is a
So
lot more.
hopefully, they'll see and they'll
Yeah.
be like, yeah, I should visit.
Yeah.
I've just got a few others. One to represent San Francisco, one from Melbourne or Australia, and then yeah. So, but mostly it'll be focused on Indian cities.
Okay. But otherwise, at home, you have like a whole bunch of.
Yeah, I focus on. So I call it like my home, which is Australia.
Hmm.
Then my origins India, and then experiences rest of the world. So
Hmm.
I always paint in these three buckets.
Yeah.
In the beginning of my artistic journey, it was mostly the experiences because these were travel souvenirs.
Hmm.
Then after settling in Melbourne, it became a lot more of painting home in Melbourne. And then with this exhibition, now I've got this
Hmm.
chance to do a lot of India.
Nice. I got an idea for you. The board game business that you could play. You get
Okay.
these tickets. Instead of that, we just start taking your paintings.
Oh yeah. That's a
But
hope
yeah.
someone watching your podcast thinks of that. And but no, I think that's the joy I get in this subject, right?
Yeah.
So some people ask me what am I thinking next, and I'm like, I'd gone to Tokyo last year, and I'm
Hmm.
so
Oh, it's a
interested in
fascinating place. I'm
it
sure you'd
is,
love
right?
to
And
put that on
yeah, and
canvas.
I'm not even talking about Japan, right? I
Right?
was just
Tokyo,
in
just
Tokyo
Tokyo.
for
Yeah.
10 days, and there's so many things I want to paint, and the
Yeah.
pat. It's again,
Yeah.
very unique. So I just love this subject because it's never boring,
Hmm.
and so I have to always sort of, like I said, there's a backlog of places I want to paint versus the time, and
Yeah.
I've just got to
It
prioritize.
makes you think, right? I mean, when you see paintings of this kind, and most of you, if you visit Chitrakala Parishad, and see his work, you'll want him to paint your city. Like I feel like come to Nagpur, my
Yeah,
hometown where I grew up.
yeah.
Can you do
And
do
paint something
Nagpur?
beyond the oranges. Of course,
Yes,
the orange will be there. Let's depict the orange in a different way, right?
correct.
But like, what else? Because
Exactly.
everyone thinks, and
Yeah, I would be so curious to know what do you observe about Nagpur,
yeah.
and then how would you put that together in one window or one big frame, and then see how that comes. I think that's the feeling that will be invoked in a lot of people when they see your work.
Yes, I
You know?
do. That's what motivates me to keep going, and
Correct.
channel my passion for exploring a place.
Sure. No, this is so awesome. This is so brilliant to just talk about this. And I'm really looking forward to your exhibition.
No, thank you.
And let's just see what and all you brought with yourself. For kids
Yeah.
also, I think the exhibition would be very interesting for kids as well, right?
Oh yes, and I think kids are honest, right? So they'll
Yes.
they'll say how it is, and a lot of kids have appreciated. And personally, even in Australia, they've thanked because I'm giving them enough to catch hold of things and then make their stories, I think,
Right.
right? So they might not know everything, they might not be interested in knowing everything at this point,
Hmm.
but there are a few symbols, a few icons there that they probably connect immediately and they can relate.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so I think they're naturally very curious, so I
Yeah.
love interacting with them.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I saw two paintings today. Learned a lot. Brilliant this was. I would definitely come to your exhibition. Have a look at it. So when's the exhibition starting?
So the exhibition sort of the doors open on the 20th of November. That's a Wednesday, and then it goes all the way till the 1st of December. I'm also super happy to announce that the Bangalore Habba, which is a well-known event now in the annual calendar of Bangalore,
Yeah.
has sort of taken my exhibition under the umbrella. So
Wow.
the 2 days that we overlap, November 30 and December 1st, are officially Bangalore Habba. It's a Bangalore Habba event. So yeah, so 12 days, and then I'll have, as you mentioned, artist walkthroughs every day. So on weekdays at 5:30, and at weekends, it'll be two times.
So you would be there as well. People can interact with you.
Yes, I'll be living out of Chitrakala and really looking forward to me because there's so many friends, family, because Bangalore has been a city I've grown up. Perhaps I'll be meeting people like after 30, 40 years also,
Sure.
maybe. So yeah, really looking forward. I'll be very much camped there. So,
Right.
I won't be far. Even if you come and I miss you, I won't be far. So
Super.
looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible.
Sounds good, man. Lovely, lovely speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
I know this is a lot of work that you have to do. The exhibition is not too far, and there's so much running around. I have seen it. So thank you so much for spending this time, and all the best for the exhibition that's coming up.
No, thanks to you, and thanks to Kedar, and this for just I think this is lovely. From where it started with a conversation to do a little quiz in the show to
Yeah.
this, I'm amazed, and that's the best thing about Pilani mates. We
Yes.
may not be able to we not be talking to each other for 20 years, and then here we come trying to do a
Correct.
podcast together, right?
Yes.
So there,
No.
cheers to Pilani.
Yeah. Absolutely. Go bits go. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.